Thanks for stopping by the channel today. My name's Jason. I'm KC5HWB. This is the extra class. This is the final class in the 3 classes of amateur radio licensing that exist in the United States today. Some of my most popular videos on this channel have been the technician class and the general class, which is class 1 and class 2, or level 1 and level 2, if you will. This is level 3. This is the final level. This is the top license you can get. And I want to thank the North Richland Hills Amateur Radio Club for allowing me to record this Zoom class they did at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. It was about 8 6 to 7 hour sessions, so you're in for a wild ride today. Go through them as many times as you want to. Fast forward, stop, pause, rewind, whatever you want to do. Play them over and over again. This is good information for those of you who are currently a general and wanting to upgrade to amateur extra. Thank you to the North Richland Hills Amateur Radio Club. Their website will be linked in the description of the video below. And I hope you enjoy the video series.
This morning session is dealing with regulations. I took this one on because it probably is the most boring part of all of the extra class stuff. And I thought maybe we could do some things that would make it a little more interesting and more palatable. I want to talk a little bit about the history of regulation of amateur radio. Back in the very early days, before anybody was on the air particularly, the transmitters were spark gap transmitters. They basically consisted of a resonant circuit and a high voltage transformer and a spark gap. And the spark gap would generate a lot of ozone in the room, so it stunk like crazy. But it also generated a pulsing of that resonant coil, which was connected to an antenna and transmitted a broadband signal. And anybody could build one. They were published in magazines, and there were a lot of people who just built them and got on the air, and there was no regulation at all. And then with the advent of commercial telegraph, wireless telegraph, where they were trying to send signals across the Atlantic to be able to connect telegraph, the commercial interests decided, why should we have hams at all? You know, why should anybody just be able to get on the air? And so they pushed for regulations in almost every country in Western civilization. And when the hams just kept persisting, they regulated us by moving us to wavelengths shorter than 200 meters, which is about 1,500 kilohertz. And those were useless wavelengths. They didn't know, commercial interests didn't know what to do with them. The hams got on the air and discovered the ionosphere, and we're soon talking across the Atlantic on 160 and basically 80 meters using spark gap transmitters. And the commercial ventures decided those were good bands too, and they would like to have them, you know. And so that question of why should we have ham radio at all, just ban the guys, led to our being assigned certain bands, and AWRL pushed for harmonic bands, 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 20, 15, and 10. And those became the standard ham bands. And regulations around the world changed on those from time to time. But because the regulations were prompted by the commercial ventures that did not want anything to compete with them, there was no broadcasting, especially music, that was allowed, because they didn't want everybody who was on the air by building their own little transmitters. They didn't want them competing with music programs. And hams really were happy with being able to communicate without having to have their bands cluttered with music and broadcasting. So that was a no-brainer. In the early days of ham radio, one of the things that was happening, at least in the United States, was radiograms. And the regulations became that you could send radiograms that didn't compete with Western Union and the telegraph companies. It would be radiograms that you wouldn't pay to send. It would be friendly greetings and that kind of stuff. And also, there was a ban on remuneration for amateur services. So if you sent telegrams, radiograms for your family or your friends, which is third-party traffic, you could not get paid for those. And one of the other features was that the amateur radio operators were crystal controlled mostly, but the tolerance on crystals was about 2 to 3%, which meant that you order a crystal for 7.010 and it might be a few kilohertz either side of that. So the regulations became, as long as you stayed in the band that you were assigned, the exact frequency didn't matter. And in the early days, that rock bound thing, like when I was a novice, you could talk to people all up and down the band because people would tune and listen for their call signs when they sent CQ. And you did the same, and you knew that the other novices were not going to be zero beat on your frequency. So that's the kind of background that got us into where we are. In the 20s, the spark gap transmitters were phased out, regulated away. There are stories of the federal government in the war effort for World War II buying ham radio stations lock, stock, and barrel, since they couldn't be used on the air during the war. And some people, some hams who got into the signal corps would show up at the place they were assigned and walked in and found their own home-built ham radio station sitting there. So ham radio played a significant part in World War II. There were national security issues, and so hams were not allowed to send encrypted messages for fear that those encrypted messages would be from spies and be very seditious. Now, the next thing I want to do is pause this, stop my sharing here, and move to a different screen. I sent out in the email yesterday the Kenwood version of the chart that I'm going to post here. Can everybody see this one? This is the AWRL graphic analysis of the frequency charts. And I like this better than either the Kenwood or the Yaesu charts because it covers every single frequency. And I want to call your attention to the section here under the key, which gives you the information. I started yesterday with the Grayscale version of this and found that the color is much more effective in communicating. I knew that CW is permitted throughout all of the amateur bands. But what I didn't realize yesterday, and one of the questions as I was reviewing, is that the Ridian data are not permitted in all of the amateur bands. They are limited to the sessions that are marked in red on this chart. And there are some CW only sections, novice technician or CW only sections. And the allocated portions, the extra class gets 25 kilohertz on the bottom of for CW and digital for 80, 40, 20, 15, 6, and 2. So those are some of the privileges that are there. Does anybody have questions about this chart?
John Park.
Yes.
The copy of that I have shows a revision date of September 22nd, 2017. And I was wondering if that has changed in any way since then.
No, it has not. That date reflects the opening of the 2,200 meters and the 630 meters. AWRL has been pushing for allocations in the long wave and medium wave, and they finally came in 2017. And there's not a lot of commercial equipment available yet for those two bands, and antennas are problematic on most city lots because the 630 meters is 210 feet. Or do I have that backwards? Yeah, it's 3 feet per meter. It's 1,800 feet or more. And most of us don't have 1,800 feet of space to deal with. So you're dealing with compromised things. When I was first licensed, the maximum power for ham radio was a kilowatt, and it was measured in terms of input power. Very few hams had watt meters that would actually accurately measure output power. And when they changed that to output power, they upped it to 1,500 watts on most of the bands. But there are 3 bands that have regulations now that are measured in terms of effective radiated power. And on 22 meters, we're allowed 1 really big watt of EIRP. That's effective isotropic radiated power. The isotropic is a mathematical thing that does not exist in the real world. It's a radiation pattern that assumes that the radiation is going equally around the entire sphere of the radiation. And realistic antennas for most city lots on 2,200 meters, the antenna is going to be so inefficient that you may be able to run 100 watts output into your antenna in order to reach that 1 watt EIRP. And 630 meters is the same thing, except we've got a 5 watt effective isotropic radiated power maximum there. And then 60 meters is a strange thing because it's a channelized allocation. And we are allowed to operate on the channels that you see there. And the frequencies at the top are the center frequency of the channel. And the frequencies you see at the bottom are the VFO frequencies for upper sideband transmission. And we're allowed to do CW and digital, except the CW and digital has to be centered in the passband. And the USB needs to be within that 2.8 kilohertz thing graphically shown in blue. And we're allowed 100 watts on 60 meters. And it's measured in effective radiated power as compared to a dipole, which means that if you're running a 100 watt transmitter, as I do, and you've got a half wave dipole, you're going to be meeting that standard. But it's probably wise to cut your power back to 90 watts or so if you're doing that kind of operation. And part of my favorite part of this chart is the stuff in the lower right corner, which gives the microwave bands. When I was first licensed, the chart here was very similar to what it is here, except that there was a note that said all above 30 gigahertz was allocated to ham radio. Since then, we've been cut back. One of these microwave bands is one of the resonant frequencies of a water molecule, which means that on a rainy day, you don't get very far because the rain soaks up all of the energy, or most of it. But, and that's why we got that particular allocation, but I don't remember which one it is. But if you look at the 10 gigahertz band, you've got 500 megahertz of bandwidth there. And that is more than all of our HF, VHF, and UHF allocation bandwidth in one single microwave band. Propagation limits on it, and with tropoducting, you can communicate further than most people think. You think of microwaves as totally line of sight, and it really is not. But I encourage you to print out a copy of this and put it on your operating table, as I have, so that you can double check those allocations as you
excuse me?
Yes, questions.
Could you email it to me so I could print it at some point?
There is a link to the page on AWRL.org.
Oh, so if I go to AWRL, I can bring it up and print it, right?
Yes, indeed.
Thank
And we'll
you.
send we'll send the link and email this week.
I appreciate it.
And you know, and I like this chart because it covers all of the ham bands. The commercial ones do not cover the microwave allocations particularly. So I'm going to go back to the Word document, and we're going to go through questions.
Can I call AWRL and ask them to mail me one, because I don't have color for my printer?
Print the Grayscale.
Say again?
They have it available in Grayscale, so print the Grayscale.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. That's great.
I like the color because the Grayscale has some confusion factors in it.
I would think so, but that's okay.
I have shared the link in the chat room too for the band plan with AWRL.
Chester, thank you so much for doing that. It is there, and if you just click on it, it'll come up on your computer. It's wonderful to have a good group of people here that can help us with that kind of technical detail. And Wayne and I appreciate it considerably. Okay, this is what the Grayscale looks like. And I decided it wouldn't be big enough to really read if we just use the Grayscale. And you can see that it's kind of confusing. The USB phone, CW RIDI, and data thing is the 60-meter allocation. And that shows up in color really well. It does not show up so well in the Grayscale. So that's another reason for the color. Okay, we're going to go through questions and go pretty quickly. Okay, here's the question. And there's my Disciples Amateur Radio Fellowship Skype call coming in on me. Which of the following carrier frequencies is illegal for lower sideband AFSK emissions on the 17 meter band, and the data segment of 18.068 to 18.110? The answer is A. Can somebody tell me why?
Is at the edge of the frequency, the lower end of the frequency?
Yes, exactly. Lower sideband AFSK. And it's at the band edge, so any transmission that you do is going to be below that 18.068. That's why A is the thing. Now you note the band edge at 18.110 is not listed as illegal because the lower sideband AFSK will be audio frequency shift keying is going to be below that band edge. You'll also note that the band also goes up to 18.168, and the portion above this does not allow Ridian data. It's sideband. Okay. What is the maximum legal carrier frequency on the 20 meter band for transmitting upper sideband audio frequency shift keying digital signals having a 1 kilohertz bandwidth? The 14070 is the PSK 31 frequency. 14100 is probably not good amateur practice to use that frequency because it's in other parts of the world it's phone band. The 14349, the top end of the 20 meter band is 14.350. But if you're doing audio frequency shift digital signals, that's not the top of the band. The top of the band is 14.150. So C is is the answer for that one. And that's how you.
I have a quick question for you, John. I'm in with a group that's called Net 105 for Packet, and we're on the 14105 lower sideband for our packet stations. Is that good amateur practice, or do we need to be on upper sideband?
14.05.
14105.
105. I would imagine there's quite a bit of activity there. I really haven't looked too closely at that. You're going to be competing with some phone stations in other parts of the world because other countries go down to 14.1, but they're going to avoid you and you're going to avoid them. So, you know, it's a first come, first service. It's legal in the band, so go for it, especially if you've been doing that for some time and you use lower sideband. Chester, you use lower sideband?
That's correct, I do.
Okay. with digital, there's a lot of variation in that. We don't have the technical problems of years ago when the sideband generation only would allow lower sideband below 9 megahertz and upper sideband above 9 megahertz. So those days are long gone with modern transmitters.
Oh, okay. I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, in the early days, there were, well, one of the most popular commercial sideband generators was a phasing thing. I owned one at one point. And the 9 megahertz IF frequency for that, when you converted it up to 2015 and 10, it was upper sideband, and when you converted it down to 80 and 40 and 160, it was lower sideband, and you could not flip sidebands. Just could not be done in those days. We did not have the phase lock loop frequency generation in those days. Okay, when a transmitter using a transceiver that displays the carrier frequency of phone signals, which of the following displayed frequencies represents the lowest frequency at which a properly adjusted lower sideband emission will be totally within the band?
Three is the magic number.
Yeah, lower sideband means that the signal is going to be, the audio signal is going to be below the carrier frequency, and 3 is the magic number as far as single sideband bandwidth is concerned. Okay, with your transmitter displaying the carrier frequency of phone signals, you hear a DX station calling CQ on 3.601 megahertz lower sideband. Is it legal to return the call using lower sideband on the same frequency? And it gives some interesting things here. You know, the DX station is there, so it's okay. The displayed frequency is within the phone segment. And the answer, of course, is the C, which is no, the sideband will be outside the band edge at 3600. And the D answer is interesting. No stations are, US stations are permitted to use phone emissions below the 3.610, which is 9 kilohertz higher. And that just shows that you don't know where the band edge is. And so this question is really very simple. Here's a question for you. What is the level below a signal's mean power level? Is its bandwidth according to the FCC rules? And the answer is D, 26 decibels below. Which means that if you've got a single sideband signal and you're you're going to have some, well, our filters are not rectangular. Our filters kind of slope out. So that audio signals which have components that are above the 3 kilohertz thing, and what it basically says is the filter needs to be such that the outside the band width needs to be 26 decibels below the mean power level, average power level for the whole single sideband system. And this is one, gentlemen, you're just going to have to learn. It's one of those technical details. It represents something like 98% of the energy transmitted is going to be in that 3 kilohertz band. And 26 decibels says that there's a 2 or 3% of the signal that can be outside of that.
Yeah, there's a good explanation in the book for that. It says 99% of the energy is contained within the walls of the specified bandwidth.
Exactly. Okay, what is the permitted mean power of spurious emissions relative to the mean power of fundamental emissions from a station transmitter or external RF amplifier installed after January 1st, 2003 and transmitting on a frequency below 30 megahertz? And that is 43 dB. And that represents the attenuation of a second harmonic out of an amplifier that has a 2 capacitor, 1 inductor filter after the final stage of the transmitter. And that's why they came up with that particular technical specification. And again, it's something you're just going to have to remember. 43. What is the maximum bandwidth for data emission on 60 meters? And the bandwidth for any use on 60 meters is specified as 2.8 kilohertz, which is a lot more than we need for FT8 and such modes. What is the maximum power permitted on the 60 meter band?
Look at the chart. It was 100 watts.
It's 100 watts, and it's relative to a half-wave dipole, not an isotropic radiator. So the dipole has some gain over the isotropic radiator, and I don't remember what that is. Does anybody know? It's on, I think it's on the order of 1 to 2 decibels. Not a lot of difference, but it's there. Okay, where must the transmitter carrier center frequency of a CW be set to comply with FCC rules for 60 meter operation? And as we talked about earlier, it's the center of the channel. The lowest frequency of the channel is about 300 hertz above the well, it doesn't really matter. And the most tempting answer is on any frequency where the signal sidebands are within the channel. That's not the way the rules are written for 60 meters. It's a special case. And it really needs to be at that center frequency. Okay, what notifications must be given before transmitting on the 630 meter and 2200 meter bands? And this one is one of those things. There's no special endorsement needed. There's no environmental impact statement that needs to be filed. And operators do not need to inform the FAA of their intent. When we got those two bands, the concern was that hams would interfere with the power grid because some of the control signals are sent over the power lines. And so the Utilities Council created a website where you go and sign up and get your and let them know where you are, and they don't notify you that it's okay, but after 30 days after you have filed that notice with them, you can operate unless they've told you you can't. And if you're within a kilometer of one of their control points, you may get that kind of notification. I've done that with both of the call signs that I've had in Texas. So I'm legal on those two bands. How long must an operator wait after filing notification with the Utilities Council before operating on those two bands? And the answer is B. 30 days after you submit the notice, you're allowed to operate, provided you haven't been told you're too close to one of the power line control systems. So there's no approval that you get and receive. Operators there's no coordination with the local power company, and it's definitely not immediately. Okay, what portion of the 630 meter band are phone emissions permitted? Blew my mind. It's 472 to 479 kilohertz, which is a very narrow band, but we are allowed to operate phone in the entire band, which blew my mind when I saw it. And it's not separated out in terms of CW digital and phone. It's just there, which, you know, I don't expect a lot of phone activity on the band, but it would be interesting if there was a group here in town that wanted to play with it and use it. Except for some parts of Alaska, what is the maximum power permitted on 630 meters? We talked about that before. It's 5 watts. And here is where your chart comes in and is most useful and helpful. Well, that's that. Get connected with what I'm doing. What's the maximum power permitted on the 2200 meter band? And we talked about that before. It's 1 watt effective isotropic radiated power. And I don't know how to measure that. Because
that was going to be my question. How the hell are we supposed to know how to measure EIRP?
Well, that's a good question, and I do not know the answer.
So do we set our radio to just transmit 1 watt and hope for the best, or?
Well, no. The antennas are so inefficient at that level. If you've got a 60-foot vertical, it is so inefficient that you could probably run 100 watts and not exceed the EIRP. So if you're running 1 watt, you're good to go.
Yeah, but if you're running 1 watt, and if your antenna is that inefficient, you won't be getting anywhere. You're not going to get to the neighbor next door.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on this band, operation is going to be mostly the below the noise digital things. The WSJTX has a mode that will allow you to use several hours of transmission time and swap back and forth between the two stations so that you're about 60 decibels below the noise, below the receiver noise to get that. There have been contacts on this band. There was a new record set within the last month. Who must be in physical control of the station apparatus of an amateur radio station aboard any vessel or craft that is documented or registered in the United States? Okay, we're going to shift to maritime mobile stuff for a bit. And the answer is the control of an amateur radio station has to be under the control of anybody holding or somebody who holds an FCC amateur license or who is authorized for alien reciprocal operations. If you're a European station operating under reciprocal terms, it's that operator authorization that's there. It has nothing to do with marine radio licenses. It's not limited to the station licensee. Your friend can operate if he has a ham ticket. And the commercial radio telephone operator permits have nothing to do with it. The commercial people can't use ham radio unless they're ham licensed as well. Okay, back again. Which of the following describes authorization or licensing required when operating a ham station aboard a U.S. registered vessel in international waters? And the answer again is B. It's an FCC issued amateur license. And novices can operate within the limits of where they are. Technicians and higher licenses, so any amateur can do it. It's not limited to that. Again, no commercial radio telephone operator permit is needed. And there is no FCC marine or aircraft endorsement for ham stations. If an amateur station is installed aboard a ship or an aircraft, what condition must be met before the station is operated? Now, this is a different situation. You've got to be a licensed ham to operate it, but you really have to have the permission of the pilot or the master of the ship, captain of the ship. You can't just walk in and set up a station and talk on it. You've got to have permission. Okay, a little shift now to radio astronomy. And the question is, what is the National Radio Quiet Zone? And all of us have heard of the few of us have heard of the National Radio Quiet Zone. The answer is C, an area surrounding the National Radio Astronomy Observatory. Anybody know where that is?
New Mexico, possibly.
Nope.
Why?
No.
It says Greenburg, West Virginia in the book.
Yeah, the book gives you that information. It is in West Virginia, and the book also gives you some other guidelines about it. But
I tell you, anyone who hasn't bought this book should go out, should make sure they have it before they take the test. There's a lot of background information in there as well that will help you pass the test.
Indeed, the background information kind of gives you some of the rationale for the question. And this is one of those questions that calls attention to some limitations on operating area. There is a limitation on the White Sands test area in New Mexico on the 420 megahertz band. And I think that's so that you don't blow up a nuclear bomb while they're trying to set it up. At least that's the impression that I got back in the 50s when they started that. Again, interference with monitoring stations. This is the FCC monitoring facility. And the answer is within 1 mile. And it doesn't say you can't operate within a mile. It just says that you must protect the monitoring facility from harmful interference. There's one of those in southern Ohio. I want to say Chillicothe, but I'm not sure that that's true. I got an advisory notice from them when I was a novice. My transmitter, I was trying to operate on 80-meter novice, and my transmitter tuned up. I didn't know it would do that, but it tuned up on 40 meters, which put me outside the band. up at 7.4 megahertz, and I got an advisory notice that said don't do that anymore from Chillicothe. There also is a monitoring station over near Omaha.
Grand Island.
Yeah, at Grand Island, Nebraska. John Dale is up there and knows about that kind of stuff. Okay. Now we get into national park stuff. What must be done before placing an amateur station within an officially designated wilderness area or wildlife preserve or an area listed in the National Register of Historic Places? And the answer is C, an environmental assessment must be submitted to the FCC. Does this mean you can't operate in a national park?
No.
No, you can go in with a temporary antenna, but it needs to be one that has no, you're going to take it with you. You're not going to set up the station to operate and leave it there. Which of the following types of amateur radio station communications are prohibited? And this is the one we talked about. No communications for hire or material compensation. And here's the catch to it, except as otherwise permitted in the rules. That's been a subject of debate ever since I was first licensed back in the 50s. And somebody raised the issue of, can AWRL employees be paid when they operate bulletins and CW code practice at W1AW? Yeah, that's one of the exceptions that's in the rules. They wrote a special exemption in order to allow for that kind of operation. But you can't do anything for hire or material compensation. You can't get paid for your radiogram. When may an amateur station send a message to a business? And the answer to that is third-party communications, but neither the amateur or his employer or her employer has interest in the communications. So can you use an auto patch to call the pizza place and have them prepare a pizza for you to pick up?
I think
A
no.
book is legal.
Well, that's been done, but under the current rules, it's not legal because you have a monetary pecuniary interest in that communications because you're going to pay them for the pizza. Which of the following types of communications may be transmitted to amateur stations in foreign countries?
C.
Yeah, basically, communications related to ham radio, signal reports, locations, those kinds of things, and remarks of a personal nature. No business, no messages. I don't know what the Maritime Satellite Service is. And definitely not all of these choices. It's only personal or ham radio type communications. Line A. Line A, in the book, there's a map that shows line A. How many miles is it away from the Canadian border? One of you who is looking at the book.
I don't see where it says miles away from the Canadian border in here.
10 miles, I thought.
I don't know whether it's 10 or 30, but it's not far, but it's south of the Canadian border. So it has nothing to do with parallel to the West Coast or parallel to the East Coast or the border with Mexico. It's a Canadian border. And so why do we have line A? And what bands does it apply to? It is basically a quiet zone for communications in the 420 to 430 megahertz band, where Canada and the US allocate the band differently. And it's to keep US stations from interfering with the Canadian use of the band, which is the next question. And the answer to the next question is amateurs may not transmit in which of the following frequency segments if they're located in the contiguous 48 states and north of the infamous line A. And the answer is 420 to 430. And it's only that 10 megahertz. So we've got this big 3,000 mile line that goes across the country, and it applies to 10 megahertz of ham allocations. What privileges are authorized in the US to persons holding amateur radio service license granted by the government of Canada? Obviously, there's reciprocal operating privileges. The answer is C. Depends on the class of Canadian license that they have, but they can't exceed US amateur extra class privileges. And in the US, they need to abide by US frequency allocations.
Hey, John,
Yes.
Is there a place in a couple or a few minutes that we could take a break, short break?
Let's see where we let's do that now, Wayne. I appreciate your suggesting that.
Okay.
Before we do that, are there questions in the material that we've covered?
I'd like to know more about the line A. I'm just a little confused on that. I guess if you live within line A, maybe I'm answering my own question. But in the book, it doesn't give you, I can't see where it has the number of miles below the Canadian border.
Okay, if you look at that question, it will give you the reference in the regulations.
Yeah.
93 point whatever.
97.3, yeah.
Yeah, if you go to that portion of the regulations, it will describe line A and give you that information.
All right, cool. Well, it doesn't really apply to me anyway, but because I don't live that close to the border, but it's just one of those good to know things, I guess.
Yeah, we down here in Texas don't worry about line A,
I'm in
But
Chicago, so I'm not going to worry about that.
well, Chicago, you're up there close.
I'm a little closer than you are.
Yes, indeed. There may be hams that you can talk to who can't talk to you in that 10 megahertz. And that's
No, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, line A, well, okay. First off, line A is north of Oklahoma, so in Texas, we don't worry about it. And
Is there
second,
anything north of Oklahoma, John?
the Northland.
Up yonder.
Yes. Also
just-
in the list of links that we sent out last week, I hope everybody got that list where all the links that we used and referred to last week. There's a couple to places you can go download a copy of the 47 CFR Part 97, and every ham needs to get that and read it at least once. And that will define and the reference to the section in the Part 47, Part 97 rules is given. I guess we need to say it for the benefit of those that don't have the book. What is the reference, John?
I don't, well,
To the,
I can go in and look
to
at
the line A, you just said it a minute ago. Here it is, 97.3. Well, it's part 97.3 explains all about line A, and I don't remember. I used to know because I was curious to find out what that had to do with and how far and stuff, but it looks like Chicago's in the clear. But yeah, you're a lot closer than we are here in Texas.
Now, that's only for people that are in Canada, right? That you can't talk to on 420 to 430, correct?
You can talk to people in well, they don't have an allocation. Their allocation is 430 to 450.
Oh, okay. So they wouldn't be talking to me anyway on 420 to 430.
Well, yeah, I have a radio that will talk in that band, but
I'm not sure if my flex will or not. I don't know. I've never tried.
well, yeah, and it doesn't do you much good to get on a frequency like 425.01 megahertz and send CQ, because there's not going to be many people listening for that.
Right. All right, cool. Well, thanks. Let's take a break then. I don't want to hold anybody else up.
Yeah, I believe, let's see, who posted the comment? Court S, KD2 SPJ posted in the comments the definition from the FCC rules. And it's not a matter of miles, it's the line that's defined by the intersections of latitude and longitude coordinates.
It is miles when you are Minnesota and west, because the Canadian border is a latitude defined border.
Well, I think Jake posted something in the chat. It says like 60 nautical miles south of the border. Does that seem right? I don't know if that's what Jay was referring to here in his post.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a later comment than where I was looking. Yes, that seems about right. That's about the number I remember from years ago when I looked that up. It's less than 100. So 60 nautical miles would be what statute miles?
Ask Siri. I don't know. Hey, Siri.
I know I'm pretty close to the A line. I'm here in Wisconsin, so.
Yeah, you need to figure out whether you're there or not.
I don't
Right.
think we're further than 60 miles, 60 nautical miles. I'm in northern Illinois, just south of the Wisconsin border. And
Uh-huh.
I know I'm not within 60 nautical miles of the Canadian border.
I'm roughly around in Dodge County in Wisconsin, so I'm not that close, but I know some people who live way up north are pretty close to that line.
Yeah.
Okay, we ready to lock and load here?
Yeah, we're going to move on from line A, gentlemen. For most of us, it doesn't apply, but if you live up near Canada, you need to know. Okay. What is meant by IARP? And IARP is an international radio permit. I don't have any idea how you apply for one, but it allows U.S. amateurs to operate in certain countries of the Americas, Central America and South America. And that's all the awareness that you get.
Hey, John.
Yes.
This is said KD4JWF. When I was applying to able to use my call sign and take my radio to Nicaragua when I was going to visit the other half of the family, I had to go through this process. Once I went to the internet to the Nicaragua radio permit website, this is the paperwork that I needed to fill out so they can approve it, and that was one of the corners of the paper actually mentioned IARP. You know, I assumed that that's what the permit I was doing to the country.
Uh-huh. So you apply via the country itself.
That's how I did, but I didn't finish it because pandemic arrived. And we're supposed to be there in April, last April. But that's what from there. That's why I was able to do all this paperwork.
Cool.
It's like a three or four pages long, and I'm pretty sure every country have a different thing. But that was part of the paper I needed to do, so I can be allowed to bring a radio and operate while I was there.
Cool. That's the beauty of having a class scattered all over the country. KD4JW, appreciate that. That firsthand information, you know, before I did the study for this thing, I had no awareness of the Central and South American IARP. I had some friends back in the 50s who were licensed in Paraguay in South America, and they were amazed that the American hams who went down took whatever licensing materials were assigned call signs that were obscene as a real joke against the American presence in the country. Okay, which of the following operating arrangements allows an FCC licensed U.S. citizen to operate in many European countries? And the answer to that is the CEPT agreement. And it's a negotiated agreement with countries in Europe and the United States so that we don't have to go through a lot of legal stuff to get there. IARP, as we just saw, is in the Americas. I don't know whether there's an ITU reciprocal license or not, but the answer to this one is CEPT.
Hey, John, I got a question / comment here. In the book here is, and under the good to know topics, it says European reciprocal licenses now limited to advanced and extra class licenses. So does that mean a general doesn't qualify to get one of these European agreements?
I think so.
So you have to be advanced or extra to qualify.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And they have a list of countries that participate in this in the book as well.
Yeah, if you're going to travel to Europe and want to operate, carry equipment and operate, it's one of those things to research. For those of us who do not plan to travel to Europe, it's not really a high priority. Which of the following is required in order to operate in accordance with the CEPT rules in foreign countries where permitted? And the only thing is C, you must bring a copy of the FCC public notice. And I did download that once. The AWRL site has a link to it, but you probably could Google it under FCC public notice DA 16-1048 and get an official copy right off the FCC website. The other thing that's required that's not in this list is your amateur radio license. But that's not the answer because there are only 4 answers, and it's which one of the following is required. If a station in a message forwarding system inadvertently, we're going to shift to messaging for a while. If a station in a message forwarding system inadvertently forwards a message that is in violation of the FCC rules, who is primarily accountable for the rules violation? And the answer to that is B, the control operator of the originating station. There was a point at which FCC was holding the control operator of the bulletin station accountable, but there's no way you could operate a bulletin station if you had to monitor every single bulletin that goes through the station. Okay, what happens if you violate it? Here comes the questions. What action should you take if your digital message forwarding station inadvertently forwards a communication that violates FCC rules? Answer is A, discontinue forwarding as soon as you become aware of it. You're not required to notify the originating station. You're not required to notify the FCC's field engineering office. And because of that, not all of these answers are correct. When may an automatically controlled station originate third-party communications? Now think of what this question is asking. An automatically controlled station. What stations are automatically controlled?
Like a repeater, maybe?
Mostly repeaters. Satellite stations are under automatic control. But the answer is never. Why in the world would we have a regulation like that? And there are two references cited. The answer to that is your unlicensed friends cannot call you using a repeater auto patch. An automatically controlled station. You see, the only way on a repeater station for that to originate a third-party message would be if you had an audio link that you could call via telephone or some other way, so that the repeater station actually originated the thing, and that's why that regulation is there.
What is an auto patch, John?
An auto patch, well, phone patch is a connecting of the phone line to a ham radio station. An auto patch, there aren't very many. There are a few still on the air, but back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of local repeaters would have an auto patch where you could actually dial, enter a code and get a phone line and dial a call. And from your mobile rig.
John.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Jose again. When I was teaching in Panama back in, it was in the 90s area, in the 90s, that was one of the biggest seller for ham radio operator was the auto patch system in the repeaters over there.
Yes.
To the extent the third commercial vendor started bringing radios from South America into Panama that you can actually have auto patch in their frequency, commercial frequency. So everybody in Panama downtown was walking around with walkie-talkies, calling each other on the auto patch. That was the thing to do over there.
That's cool. The only time I ever used an auto patch, I was coming into Peoria, Illinois, where my mother and father were at the time. And I called the repeater and asked if someone would relay to my mother a message, and the station that responded keyed the auto patch and dialed the number for me. Totally confused my mother because it was half duplex. She couldn't talk while I was talking, and she didn't figure out how to deal with that. Totally different experience. Okay, moving right along. How do the control operator responsibilities of a station under automatic control differ from one under local control? And you know that the answer is B, because all the other answers deal with the question of who's under local control, there's no control operator. No. You are the control operator if you're operating locally from your desk. Under automatic control, there is a control operator, but that control operator is not required to monitor 24 hours, 7 days a week. That control operator does have responsibility for the operation of the repeater at all times. And control operator under local control, control operator is not required to be present at a control point. Under local control, you have to be in control. and be present at a control point. So under the automatic control, you can let the repeater run even though you've walked out of the room and don't have your handheld there, so you can shut the repeater down instantly. What indicator is required to be used by U.S. licensed operators when operating a station via remote control, and the remote control remote transmitter is located in the U.S.? And the answer is that no additional indicator is required. Okay, what is the maximum permissible duration of a remotely controlled station's transmissions if its control link malfunctions? And the answer is B, 3 minutes. And that's part of the process of setting up a remote control link. And this is one of those things you just have to remember, it's 3 minutes. What must the control operator of a repeater operating in the 70 centimeter band do if a radio location system experiences interference from that repeater? The answer is cry a lot. No, the answer is to cease all operation or make changes in the repeater pattern. This is one of those rules that comes from some experience in California, where the repeaters on the mountaintops interfered with a radio location system on the West Coast. And because we're secondary on the 70 centimeter band to the radio location services, we cannot cause interference. And unless you can make changes to the repeater to mitigate that interference, there was some negotiation with the radio location people whose first thing was get off our band. And the repeater operators were able to negotiate some changes that allowed them to co-operate in the band. And for example, reducing the repeater height above average terrain might or might not mitigate the interference. So it's, shared band, ham radio is secondary. You got to shut her down. Okay, who may be the control operator of an auxiliary station? And the answer is B. What is an auxiliary station? Does anybody know what an auxiliary station is?
I'm just reading out of the book here because I didn't know what it was.
Okay. An auxiliary station would be, for example, like a link. If you had a split site repeater and had a link between the receive site and the transmit site, that link would be an auxiliary station. or if you had a remote base station and were sending the audio from your walkie-talkie through a repeater that went off to, in a chain, then that station in between would be the auxiliary station. Here is one that I enjoyed dealing with when I was doing my study. How do ALE stations establish contact? And there's a link here if you're interested in learning more about ALE stations. The answer is A. The ALE constantly scans a list of frequencies activating the radio when the designated call sign is received. And it's a section or a system for finding the best frequency to communicate on. And there's software that's available that would let you actually do that frequency scanning. I think it requires a rig that can be automatically controlled by computer software, like most modern rigs nowadays can. But it goes through the list of frequencies and it looks for your call sign, and when it's there, it activates the radio for you.
I got a comment on ALE.
Yes, go ahead.
If you're really interested in it, and I've subscribed to his channel, Ham Radio Crash Course, Josh Hasnasi, I think that's his last name.
Yeah.
Ham Radio Crash Course did a pretty in-depth demo, actually a live chat on ALE, how to install it, how to run it and stuff, and I think made a couple of contacts using it. So it was very helpful. I follow him all the time, and he's really good. He just started hosting Ham Nation as well, so he's a good resource to have for any of your ham stuff. He's almost as good as Jason. I know, because I know Jason.
Yeah, I've seen some of his YouTube videos, so I'm aware of his presence.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. One of the things that this exam shows you is the breadth of ham radio anymore. When I was first licensed, it was CW and phone was AM. And there was a little bit of RTTY using the old surplus or type 15 teletype machines that were pulled out of service. And they were frequency shift keyed teletype back in the day. And that was it. Didn't have all this other stuff.
Well, I've run into a few old time hammers out there that if you're not doing CW or phone, you're not really a ham operator. I say to each their own.
I love FT8 too much.
Same here.
Okay, let's get back to it. Which of the following stations may transmit one-way communications? And the answer is a space station, a beacon station, or a telecommand station. It's not a local repeater or a linked repeater. A message forwarding station or an automatically controlled digital station. That's intended to be communications, and therefore all of the answers are not correct. It's just a space station, or a beacon, or a telecommand station where you're sending a command to something or other. What is the maximum permitted power output to a model craft by telecommand? Remote control signal for your model airplane or for the boat you just put in the water? And the answer is 1 watt. What type of regulations does PRB1 apply? PRB1 is it's the ruling that FCC did that saved the satellite television systems from extinction by homeowners associations, because it said that homeowners associations had to make accommodations to the satellite TV stuff. And so the answer is homeowners association. It has nothing to do with FAA height limitations. It has nothing to do with state and local zoning, and it's not anything to do with mobile devices. It's homeowners associations.
Hey, John, in the
Yes.
not to interrupt, but in the book it says this. It says C is the answer in the book.
Does it?
Yeah, E1 B07 E1 B07 says the answer is C, state and local zoning. It says Part 1 FCC ruling that clarifies that the federal government has preemption over state and local zone regulations.
Okay. You're correct. The E1B, the answer is in that little thing at the top up there, and it is C. I really messed that one up. Sorry.
No worries.
Well, part of the value of that can come from my making a mistake and it getting corrected.
You should know we're paying attention. We're not sleeping.
Well, that, and it also calls everybody else's attention to the fact that the presenter is a dummy and doesn't know what he's talking about on some things.
No. Don't go there. Don't go there, John.
Well, no, I feel very competent and very capable, or I wouldn't make that kind of a statement. But all of us can make mistakes. We're human. And here's where I did, and forget the homeowners association piece.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we spend like a minute on this? So, having read the definition in the book, unless the way I read it, if you live in a HOA neighborhood, you've basically signed a contract with them saying that you won't have antennas or I guess whatever their rules are. But if you don't live in a neighborhood with an HOA, the way I read this, you can pretty much put up any size antenna you want.
That's not quite what PRB1 does. It basically says that the state and local zoning people have to pay attention to the need for antennas.
I think they have to make reasonable allowances for you to operate as an amateur radio,
Right.
licensed amateur radio. They just can't say no without having a damn good reason for telling you why you can't put up an antenna. Like, for example, I live pretty close to a regional airport. So if I'm within the approach or takeoff path of the landing zone, if you will, or the landing strip, then I'm restricted in height as far as how high I can go with my towers and stuff. But it's stuff like that I think the city and state have jurisdiction over versus, but they have to make reasonable allowances for you to be able to operate, other than just giving you a flat out no. Where unlike homeowners association, you voluntarily entered into that agreement, so you have to abide by theirs. That's why I would never live in an HOA area, but that's just me. So,
well, that's an area that has to be considered by all hams. Part of the problem with PRB1 is that it is limited in its application to ham radio, and AWRL has been lobbying Congress to pass a thing that allows the preemption ruling by the FCC to apply to hams in the same way that it applies to satellite television. And we've not had success. There's been a senator in Florida, in the West Palm Beach area, where they really object to ham antennas. And that Florida senator has blocked the consideration of the bill in the Senate. What does PRB1 require of regulations affecting ham radio? And this is the answer that we just talked about. Reasonable accommodations must be made. Under what circumstances might the FCC issue a special temporary authorization, STA, to an amateur radio station? And the STAs are authorizations to provide for experimental amateur communications. The most notable one recently was the STA for stations operating between 505 and 510 kilohertz down below the broadcast band. And those stations did not have the power limitation of the 630 meter medium wave band. I think that STA is still in place, and over the years, it's allowed hams to do things that were not necessarily covered in the ham regulations, but to experiment with stuff. So STA is, just remember, experimental amateur communications. It does not provide additional spectrum for personal use other than what's covered in the authorization itself. and it has nothing to do with operating while you're waiting for licensing. Which amateur stations may be operated under RACES rules? And the answer is stations that are certified by Responsible Civil Defense for the area served. And here in Texas, there's quite a certification process. I think there's an 8-hour training program you have to go through. And what frequencies are authorized to RACES under the rules? And the answer is all amateur frequencies are authorized. What is a volunteer examiner coordinator? Now, the next thing is going to be a series of questions on volunteer exam coordination. When I was first licensed, you took the novice test, but given by a single ham volunteer. Anybody with a general or higher license was eligible to give that test, and it consisted of a code test and a written test. And there was a conditional license which had general class privileges but was administered by any ham that was licensed. No certification was required, but most licenses, other than the novice and the conditional, you had to travel to an FCC licensing station, and they would have designated dates when you could go. And I was 50 miles away from Nashville, Tennessee when I was first licensed. Traveled to Nashville twice before I got my general class. I failed the code test the first time. But in the 80s, they did away with FCC doing the licensing, and they went to volunteer examiner coordination. So what is such a thing? And the answer is C. It's an organization that has entered into agreement with FCC to coordinate, prepare, and administer amateur operator licensing things. Our club works with W5YI VEC in Arlington, Texas, but AWRL VEC is another. There are 14 of them currently. And just this week, the FCC issued a notice of inquiry asking whether they need to expand the VEC program and have more volunteer examiner coordination. So if you want to comment about that, there's a way to do it. You can go to the AWRL website and find the links. Who does Part 97 task the maintaining of the pools of questions for all amateur licensing examinations? And it's the VECs. All 14 of them have representation on the exam pool committees. And FCC doesn't do anything with it. AWRL doesn't do it. AWRL VE does. VEC does. But not the AWRL specifically. It's that coordination group of VECs. Which of the following best describes the volunteer examiner accreditation process? Since I'm a volunteer examiner with both W5YI and AWRL VEC, they check that you're licensed. They check AWRL actually has a test that they submit, and W5YI, you have to promise that you're going to read the guidelines. They don't check you to see if you actually did or not. So it's the VECs, volunteer examiner coordinators, those organizations confirm that the applicants, and they certify you. And I've got both of my little tags, name tags posted on a wall over here next to me. What type of out-of-pocket expenses do the Part 97 rules state that VEs and VECs may be reimbursed? And the answer is A, preparing, processing, and administering the coordinating an exam for an amateur radio operator license. I don't know about the other VECs, but it's $14 per exam for W5YI. And it's the paper for printing and copying the exam and mailing costs and that kind of thing that are reimbursed. But it's nothing for teaching the exam. It's there are expenses that are authorized, and VECs do charge them. And I don't know why D is not a part of that, but I guess there's some reason.
Back when I took my technician license, it cost me $15 for my technician.
You paid $15 for the technician?
That's correct.
Which VEC?
I think it was the AWRL.
Okay. Each VEC gets to decide what that fair reimbursement is. I'm sure there's some reporting to FCC on it that allows for some check and balance on it. Okay, which of the following examinees may a V...
Your mic's too close to your mouth, John.
Okay, I'll back it. Put it back where it belongs. Your VE, who may you not administer an exam to? The answer is C, your relatives, your children, your wife, your mother and father, and some other relatives in your immediate family. And the list is in the FCC rules. In our club, if we have the same last name as a person who is being examined, we try to get somebody else to give the exam, even if we're not related, because W5YI will challenge you if you have somebody with your own last name there. that's taken very seriously.
Now, I have a quick
And
question.
it's, yeah,
How come we can't give our relatives administer a test?
it's a check on cheating. I have a cousin who is handicapped and had a conditional license for many years. And I am convinced he was licensed back in the early 70s. He was licensed in the late 60s, I guess. And I'm convinced that the local radio club passed him on that conditional license because they wanted to get him on the air because he was handicapped. And that was terribly illegal for them to do that. But there was no check on it in those days. And you have an emotional attachment. If you want your son to get a license and you're a VE, there's some pressure on you to pass the kid, help him with the answers and that kind of thing. That's the rationale for it, Chester.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hey, John,
yes.
we have another question about testing. Virtual testing, can it be done how far away? Like in Virginia?
We've tested people on the East Coast.
I got my general through GLARG, Greater LA Amateur Radio Club. So I got my technical and general from LA, from the club, from the VEC in LA.
Yeah, it's internet based, so anywhere you wanted, you could actually test overseas. Okay, who is responsible for the proper conduct and necessary supervision during an amateur license examination? And the answer is every administering VE. Takes 3 to do the administering, and every single one of those has the power to say, nope, you violated the rules and you're cheating and tough. So you have absolute control over it, and you're responsible for it. And there are some penalties if you don't honor that responsibility. What must administering VEs do after administration of a successful examination for an amateur operator license? And they must submit the application document to the coordinating VEC according to the guidelines of that particular VEC. W5YI has a lead volunteer examiner who coordinates the session, and he's responsible, or she's responsible, for getting the paperwork in. When you do it remotely, that paperwork is done electronically with paperwork following.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I heard you answering this question when I was signing on, and I was having trouble getting my computer situated. Someone asked you what I was wondering about the other day about how you can do this on the internet without somebody there to watch you, and you have a secure way of doing that, obviously, because you just said it's on the internet.
It's done via internet. We use Zoom. W5YI uses Zoom. We also have a coordinating channel on can't think of the name of the application. And in setting up the session, we ask the participant to show us the room that they're in, turn their camera around so we can see the operating table and what's in the room. And that's why I suggest a kitchen type environment where you don't have papers on the wall or books on the desk.
And that,
But I ought to be all right. But probably I'm sitting in my living room, and I could put the book where I can't get to it, and I don't have a hand computer that has equational capabilities. It's just plain old TI, you know. It's just numbers you put in there.
Well, you've got the exam software.
and
Well, anyway, let's not get into that
Anyway,
stuff. We can deal with that. We can deal with that.
You answered my question. Yes, it can be done. That's all I care about.
Okay, let's move on. We can have some time in a later session.
I'm just glad I don't have to go somewhere else to have it done. That's it.
Well, yeah, we're gonna have some schedule.
Go ahead and do what you need to do. Okay.
I will. What is the minimum passing score for all amateur operator license examinations? And the minimum passing score is the magic number of 74. And you just have to remember that one.
Well, John, one way I remember it is it's one higher than the 73.
I was just going to say that, Wayne.
There you go. You got it.
Okay.
73 plus 1, my friend.
Okay. The way I remember it is that it's higher than the 70 that marked the difference when I was in college between the D and C levels of passing, which was 70. And it's the first one above that. But however you need to do it to remember it, that's one you shouldn't miss on the test if you get that one and you're lucky enough to have it. Okay, what must the VE team do if an examinee scores a passing grade on all examination elements needed to upgrade to a new license? And 3 VECs must certify that the examinee is qualified for the license grant and that they have complied with administering the VE requirements. There's a form that needs your signature that a copy goes to the licensee, and they can, when they walk out of the exam, if it's an upgrade and they have a call sign, they can operate it with the new privileges the minute they walk out. There's also some other paperwork the VECs require that you sign off on, but 3 must certify.
Now, I know when you upgrade to a general from a technician, you can operate in general frequencies, but you have to add stroke AG, don't you?
That's correct.
Do you have to do that from general to amateur, from general to extra?
Yes, there's also a similar thing.
Okay, and that would be stroke.
I don't know what it is. Who knows?
I'll look it up. Thanks.
Well, it's almost a moot issue because, especially with W5YI, when you're doing remote testing, we have had actually licensees who pass the test the evening, and by noon the next day they've got the license.
Yeah, but if someone looks you up on QRZ, and if you're in the extra frequency range, though, sometimes they may give you a hard time about it, whatever. But
Yeah.
Mike just put in the chat stroke AE, so thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's the beauty of having a group like this. We can get answers quickly. What must a VE team do with the application form if the examinee does not pass the exam?
This is when you cry.
Well, it is weeping and gnashing of teeth. I know how that feels like. I've been there. But the answer is return the application document to the examinee. That's not the test document, it's the exam application document. That would be the FCC form that you fill out giving the particulars. What should a VE do if the candidate fails to comply with the examiner's instructions during an amateur license exam? And the answer is B, immediately terminate the candidate's exam. If you, well, I've never had that happen in an exam that I've been in. But if you had somebody who had answers written on their hand or got into a handbag for a handkerchief or whatever, you would take whatever action you thought necessary. And if you had any suspicion at all, you would immediately terminate the exam. It would not be the most comfortable experience for anybody. But, you know, most people who want to take a ham radio license exam really aren't there. They want the license. They don't want to have the exam terminated because they were cheating. So just that sheer effect means that most of the people that you exam, only rarely are you going to get that as any kind of a problem. Okay, what may be the penalty for a VE who fraudulently administers or certifies an examination? And the answer is, you ain't no ham no more. Revocation of amateur station license grant and the suspension of the operator license grant. And because you're sharing that responsibility with, or have co-responsibility with 3 other people, it's not likely that you're going to allow fraudulent examinations, because none of the 3 of you want to lose your licenses over it. And that, gentlemen, is the end of the licensing section. Are there questions?
I have a comment to make, and that is the body of information is so large that if I make a 50% first time I take this, I feel like I'm Einstein.
Well, we're shooting for 100% passing, gentlemen. One of the things that I will post this week in the email that'll go out Monday or Tuesday will be a couple of links to places where you can take test exams. And one of the things you might want to do in preparation for the next couple of weeks is actually take a sample exam and see what your scores are. With what we've covered now, and knowing what you already know, you probably should be scoring at least 65 or 70 at this point with no further study. But try it and see, and if it'll also tell you which areas you need to pay attention to. And the areas where you should have the most problem will be the areas we've not covered yet.